Are you guys able to see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. So before we get started for today's call, right, I'm going to quickly introduce about myself. What are the things that we're going to cover? What are the different offerings that we have from the training standpoint? That is something that we're going to discuss today. Okay, so my name is Panish. Um I've been working on MicroStrategy and other visualization tools. It's been like more than 11 years now. And from the training standpoint, I would say, especially for MicroStrategy, right? So we have two separate trainings, one where we focus on architect and development, and second where we have related to administration. So I understand that you guys are looking out for the architect and development training, and definitely I'm going to walk you through as to what are the topics that we cover up, okay, under both the trainings. So at least that it becomes easy for you to understand, what is the agenda that we would be following up in the in the upcoming training. So definitely in today's call, I'm going to walk you through on the topics. I'll also discuss about the architecture of MicroStrategy. I will show you some interfaces, and definitely it's going to be a good walkthrough. So I would say yes, this is pretty much about myself. It will be great if you can introduce yourself and what is the expectation out of this training, so that we can pace it accordingly. Emmanuel, can you just start from you, please?
Yes, my name is Ibanyan. It's my second
Mm-hmm.
time to take part to this station. I took part to this station last year, and
Okay.
yes, and I just came into the station one more time to have some more knowledge in the architecture, the MicroStrategy architecture. And my question is on regarding the latest version, the 10.11. Are you doing training on with that version? Because I heard that in that version we have something called dossier to have more knowledge on this one.
Yes, that's correct. So 10.11, see, MicroStrategy has two things. One, it's an enterprise version, and second is the analytics desktop version. Sorry. Okay. So yes, in the analytics desktop as well as in the enterprise, in both the versions, we have something called as dossiers, which is initially it was called as Visual Insights. Now they have been called as dossiers, and definitely it has a lot of functionalities that are present. So we do cover that as well. We look out for the latest version that are present in the market, and based on that, we continue with that training. Yep.
Okay, that's what, another question now. Do you provide that software too? Because on the software you provide for the live station at with you, it was MicroStrategy 9.7, I think, and in 9.7 we don't have the option to get it dossier. So do
Yeah.
you provide software?
Dossier. Okay. So for there are two separate questions. First, I would say the dossier was been introduced after 10.3. First of
And
all, okay, in 9.7 it was called as Visual Insight.
that's
All
okay.
right. Second part is definitely we will give you the evaluation version. It is available
Mm-hmm.
on MicroStrategy site as well. I will help you out on that, and you will get to install 10.11, which is the latest version.
Got you.
Okay, so when you joined a year back, at that point of time, maybe the 9.7 was the latest version. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so now definitely it's going to be 10.11, and it does have a dossier as well.
Got you. Got you. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. And so I understand when you say dossiers and everything, like, so definitely you're looking out for the architects in development, correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. Cool. All right. Thank you so much.
Mhm.
Uh, Jubril, can you just quickly introduce yourself? What is the expectation of this training, please? So that we can just continue accordingly. I guess that you're on mute, so you can just unmute your mic, and I think thereafter you should be able to, and if we would be able to hear you out. Okay, it seems that mic is not working for him. Looks like. Okay, no problem, Jubril. We will go ahead with today's call. Uh, in case you have anything to discuss, you can definitely ping us under the chat window. Okay, so let's get started. The first thing that I'm going to again do is that I'm going to quickly walk you through about the MicroStrategy development training content. Okay. Hey Jubril, no problem. That's okay. We understand you're having some difficulty with your mic, so that's okay. Not a problem. Okay, so when we work on MicroStrategy, right, the first thing that we're going to discuss is about the MicroStrategy architecture. How MicroStrategy interacts with the other components, right? So there are a lot of components that might be involved. So one we have is the database, there's something called as metadata, the web component, and so on. So we really need to understand whenever a user put forwards any kind of a data request, how exactly the processing happens. Okay, so that is something that we're going to discuss. Okay, just a second. All right, so that is something that we're going to discuss. I'm going to walk you through about that as well. All right, so we will first start with about the MicroStrategy architecture, getting acquainted with the entire interface, and so on. Thereafter, we're going to do a bit of administration, because see, working on MicroStrategy is good, but at least we also need to understand how the environment is set up, how the server configuration is done, how the web server has been configured, and so on. So all these things will we will be discussing in this particular training as well, where we're going to start it from the scratch. Now let's say that you have just installed the software, okay, and we have to make sure that we configure the metadata, then we configure the server, then we configure the projects, connect it to the data warehouse, and on top of that we're going to have the web connection. So this the entire setup also is something that we do cover up under our training, because we have to make sure we need to understand how the backend configuration has been done. And once that environment has been set up, from there onwards, we straight away start with architect and development training. And I would say training, but at least the concepts around it. So the first thing that we do over here is we brush up our concept from the logical data model and physical data model standpoint. We are not going to design any model as such, but we will see how I can leverage this logical model and physical model more from my architect standpoint. What are the different objects that I can identify by looking at my logical and physical model, and how I can replicate those models within my MicroStrategy project. So thereafter, we're going to see all the semantic layer designing. These are all MicroStrategy architect designing, where we start with importing the tables, creating the attributes, defining the relationships, creating the facts, creating the hierarchies, transformations, and so on. So there are two types of objects that we do have. One where we call it as schema objects, the architect objects, and other is the public object, or you can say as application objects. So once you're done with all your semantic layer designing, on top of that, you will have your application layer design. We call it as MicroStrategic basic development. Okay, so we start creating the metrics, filters, reports, do all the data and style manipulations, and so on. So once you're through with this particular module, I can say that you have a kind of an experience on basic MicroStrategy development and architect as well. Thereafter, we go with the deep dive. We take a deep dive into the advanced concepts. And when I say advanced concepts, we will see how I can fine tune my reports, how I can create a cube-based reports. There are something called as VLDB properties, free-form SQL reports, some advanced objects like advanced metrics, advanced filters, consolidations, custom groups, and so on. So we're going to take a step ahead, and we will definitely discuss in depth about the advanced functionalities or the advanced objects. And lastly, we're going to concentrate on the report service documents and dashboards. So I would definitely say that Like, it's not that we're going to cover just the analytics desktop. We will consider the enterprise software itself, where we're going to do it end to end development and architect. Okay. And at the last, we're going to cover both the types of dashboards. One is the report service documents, and the second is the visual insight, or you can say dossiers. So this is the entire a kind of a training content that we're going to follow for the next 3 to 4 weeks, or 4 to 5 weeks, I would say at least. I'll take a pause over here. Any questions so far, please, before we go ahead and discuss on the other things for today? No questions? All right. So the next, so this is about the training content. Okay. No questions. All right. So this is about the training content. The next thing that I want to discuss, which we really make sure that every one of us get to know, is about the MicroStrategy architecture. Let's try to understand how the MicroStrategy works and what are the different components that have been involved. Okay, so now one core part of MicroStrategy, I would say, is something called as metadata, the one that I'm going to highlight now, this one. Okay, a metadata, I would say, is a repository local to MicroStrategy. Okay, before that also, let's consider any warehouse project. Okay, forget about MicroStrategy for typing. Consider any warehouse project. What are the different things that you go through? First, I get some data. Like when I say I get the data, means the ETL team. So they get some data which is raw, unprocessed. On top of that, they do all their transformation logic through ETL tools, and they store it into the warehouse. So this forms a part of your backend. At the front end, through any of your BI tool, you get the data from the warehouse and display it in the form of reports or the dashboards. Correct? So the one you can see over here on the left hand side of this particular line is something which forms the back end, and on the right hand side we have MicroStrategy, which is a front end. Okay, so the source system is nothing but it's the actual source of your data, the data that we receive from our client. Okay, and on top of that we apply all the ETL logic, that is extract, transformation, and loading. So we extract the required data from the warehouse, we apply all the required transformations, and finally we load it into a warehouse. And when I say a warehouse, it's a database which consists of all the required tables and columns, and the corresponding data is stored under it. So now, once we have the data available under the warehouse or the database, on top of that we will have a MicroStrategy. So whenever you run any kind of a request, you request for any kind of a data from MicroStrategy, it doesn't goes and hit the warehouse directly. One very important component of MicroStrategy that we do have is something called as metadata. Now don't get confused between the metadata and warehouse. They are two separate repositories. Warehouse is the actual organization data where on which you want to do your reporting. Metadata is only local to MicroStrategy environment. Whatever activity that you do within MicroStrategy, correct, all its corresponding information and definition will be stored over here. So let's say you create a new user, you create a new object, you modify any object. So all its corresponding information will be stored over here. Okay, so it does not contains any organization data. Okay, just give me a second. Okay, all right. So as I said, the metadata is nothing that it will not contain any organization data, but it's only local to your environment. So if I create an object, if I modify an object, if I delete an object, so all its corresponding definitions and information will be stored over there. Okay, so now let's say for an example, I'm trying to run a report in MicroStrategy where I want, let's say, customer wise sales. Okay, so when I try to run that report, now see, I will definitely have some object which gives me customer information and sales information. So when I run that particular report, the first thing it will do is it will come to metadata. It will first understand what all objects you have used in your report. We have customer and sales. Thereafter, as I said, metadata contains the object information and definition. It will try to retrieve those definition, like customer is pointing to which table, which column, sales is pointing to which table, which column. And once those definitions have been fetched, accordingly, it will generate the SQL query. Once that query is ready, once that query is formulated, it will open a connection to the warehouse, execute that particular SQL, get the data, and finally, it will come back to MicroStrategy and display that data as per the format that you have set it up within your reports or dashboards. So this is the entire end-to-end process that happens. Okay, so you get the data from source systems and all those forms a part of your backend. But from MicroStrategy standpoint, every request will go through metadata. It will read those definitions, the object definitions, formulate the queries, open a connection to the warehouse, execute that SQL, and finally, it will display the consent data. I'll take a pause over here. This is about the MicroStrategy BI architecture. Any question, please? No question? Perfect. Okay, so now let us go through some interfaces of MicroStrategy and we'll try to run some sample reports. We will try to see some sample functionalities and so on. Now in MicroStrategy, there are two things that you will come across. One is something called as MicroStrategy Developer Tool. Now this is a tool where your entire architect and development will happen. As an end user, they will never have access to developer tool. Okay, so this is a developer instance, okay, the one that you see on your screen, that is the developer instance where all the architect and development work will happen. Okay, and so now on the left hand side, those are all called as project source. Okay, don't worry, this is at very high level. Definitely we're going to discuss much more in detail, but yes, it's good to get acquainted with the terminologies. Okay, so now on the left hand side, whatever folders that you see are called as project source. Now project source is a direct or indirect connection to your metadata. So when I try to log in into any of my project source, I have to authenticate myself. You have to enter the required credential, and once those authentication are successful, it will allow us to access the projects under it. Okay, so I'm trying to connect to that project instance, a project server instance, and you can see over here within that I can see two folders which are called as project. So the project source is the hosting environment. You log in into that, and under that you can see the required projects for which you have an access. Now every project is connected to some or the other warehouse on which you want to do your reporting. Okay, so my MicroStrategy tutorial is pointing to X warehouse, and let's say my human resources is pointing to some other warehouse. So now if I try to log in into my project, I would be able to see all the objects that are available under it. And as I've told you right few minutes back, at a very high level, we have two types of object. One, the schema objects where we build all entire semantic layer. And second is the application object, or you can also say as public objects. All right, so now let me just create a sample report. Okay, so I'm just going to say create new report. Now this is a sample project, right, where the objects are already been created earlier. So I'll just create one sample report and we will see, right, how the information have been processed. So let me do one thing. I will add the region. Let's say I want to see the data for region. I want to see the data for year. And against that, I want to see the data for revenue. Okay. So now when I run this report, you can just visualize the exact process that's going to follow, right? We just discussed in the architecture, right? It will go to the metadata, generate the query, get the data. So if when I run this report, the entire same process happens. And once that query is been executed, you can definitely see the data that has been fetched. So we can definitely see the data for region across the years and the corresponding revenue numbers. Okay. So this is the simplest example, but the every reports that you run in MicroStrategy does follow the same process. All right. Does it make sense, guys? Any question over here? Make sense? Perfect. All right. The second interface that I at least want to cover for today, where we have something called as MicroStrategy Web. Now, MicroStrategy Developer tool is something where only the architects and developers like us will have an access to it, where we will build the entire interface and the environment for the users. Web is a UI where the end users logs in into the environment and they can run the reports and dashboards and visualize the data. Through MicroStrategy Web, you cannot create, first of all, any kind of schema objects. You cannot build semantic layer in MicroStrategy Web. Yes, it's not possible. You can definitely create certain public objects, though limited, but yeah, semantic objects not possible. So let me log in into MicroStrategy Web. I will again browse you through some simple interfaces here and there, and that is something that we will conclude for today. So it's going to be a short call because considering it's a demo and initial week as well. Okay, we're going to take it a topic by topic because we have to make sure that you guys are onboarded, you guys are know that understand how the MicroStrategy works, and we will also make sure that entire software has been set up on your personal laptops as well. So initially week, I would say the call would be around like 45 minutes. Okay, but after that we will make sure that it's around 45 minutes to 1 hour. So initially it will be 30 minutes to 45 minutes. Okay, and thereafter a week after we will make sure that it's around 45 minutes to 1 hour. Okay, so let me log in into one of the environment over here. Okay, I'm again authenticating myself. I'm entering the required credentials. And let me do one thing. I'll just run one sample report or a dashboard. And yeah, the generally, so user will come over here. They will go to the corresponding folders where the reports or the dashboards are residing, and they will simply come and execute it. So once they request for the data, right, once they click on the reports or the dashboards, the corresponding components or the base reports will be executed, the data will be fetched, and you can see that it's going to be displayed as per the format that we set it up. Okay, so this is a simple visual insight dashboards that we have. If I go to the presentation mode, and you will definitely going to understand as we continue with our training how to create such kind of a dashboard. So we have a selector, which is going to make sure that it reflects the data we have set in a grid format, in a graph format. We have a different tabs over here where we can definitely browse the data from one panel to the other panel and so on. So all these things, this is just a sample dashboard, very simple and straightforward dashboard, but all of the things are going to be discussed much more in detail as we continue with the training. So definitely we're gonna start it from the scratch. We have the warehouse, sample warehouse, where we will first configure the metadata. We create a project, we connect that project to the warehouse, and thereafter we will start importing the tables, designing the all the schema objects, the public objects, and finally we will see how to report, how to create such kind of a reports, dashboards, and so on. So I would say this is all that we have from today's call standpoint. Definitely the development training runs for around like 4 to 5 weeks. We will have a daily calls Monday to Friday EST around same time. Okay. And on an average I would say this training runs around like 4 weeks to 5 weeks to cover end to end every topics. I'll take a pause. Please let me know in case you have any question or you want to discuss on anything. Any questions, guys? Okay, so I have a question over here. Been thinking if we can have access to the materials while the training is ongoing. Definitely you're gonna have an access to the materials. Okay. Apart from that, every class will be recorded, and those recordings will be shared with you as well. And that's gonna be for a lifetime, right? So you will definitely have a reference of those recordings. You can go through that. You can understand that offline once a class is over on daily basis. And yeah, that will be a good I would say reference to just brush up your concepts and at least go through whatever we have been discussing on a daily call. And apart from that, we will also share some manuals which will act as a repository for you. All right, perfect, not a problem. Any other question, guys, before we sign off for today at least? No questions? All right, sure. So I would say that you can get in touch with the big classes. Apart from that, definitely we can start straight away. So the big classes will definitely help you out to understand from when we can start. We will understand your requirement from the timing standpoint, and based on that, we can get started straight away. Okay, so I will definitely the big classes will get in touch with you. You can provide your feedback, you can provide your requirement, and based on that, we can get started with the batch. All right, perfect then. So thank you so much, guys. Thanks a lot for joining in. It was a great discussion that we had, and definitely excited to start with a new batch. Thank you so much, guys, and have a nice evening. All right, thank you.